to join us right now at the top of hour number 2, fresh back from Indianapolis. Edition of the Rich Eisen Show is a longtime friend of this program and a sight to see, certainly on a day like this. Dan Orlovsky. How are you doing, Dan? Good to see you.
I'm doing really good. Good to see you, bud. How are you doing?
I saw a lot of your NFL Live crew in Indianapolis, Dan. I saw a bunch.
I was getting consistent pictures from them, so there was a little FOMO, a little jealousy, but I think those two, specifically Laura and Mina, held their own.
Well, I mean, it was it was just great meeting. Mina I'd never met Laura before. And it's just great to see the chemistry. The off the air is exactly what I see on the air. So really great stuff.
Yeah, they're great people. Laura's tremendous. So,
Laura, let's just jump into what you saw on the screen from the guys who spun it, and what your impressions are of the quarterbacks that were active on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I'd start with this, Rich. I'm not a massive combine throw person, and really not a massive pro day throw person. I think the tape for me is always what stands out, but unless a guy is so impressive throwing the football that it's such a overwhelming positive takeaway, I think Michael Penix, the ball just comes off of his hands differently. I think the ball jumps out of his hand, and if you for Michael, it's like this journey of, well, I had 2 awesome seasons in a row at Washington where I threw for almost 10,000 yards and 75 plus touchdowns. So great. And then you go through the process of, pro combine, and 2 really things for him that are important are how he threw the football, because if you do it better and differently than anybody else that's there, now those top 3 guys didn't throw, but he threw it better than anybody else at the combine. And then from all things that I've heard, the medical went really well. So I think that was a really big weekend for Michael Penix. I'll use your guy, and I don't want to say your guy, but obviously Michigan alum, J.J. McCarthy. I couldn't care less that he had incompletions at the combine. I love the fact that he went out there and threw it hard, shut off his arm. I think that's one of his underrated assets and skills. So, the variance of those guys, it's great that Michael stood out in that regard. It doesn't make me think anything differently and or less of JJ that he had some incompletions.
So then let's get to the guys as a group then, removing what we saw over the weekend. Are you still a Jayden Daniels is the best quarterback available in the draft guy, Dan?
Yeah, I am. After, watching, I don't like to say anything about these guys unless I've watched all of their snaps in totality. The only 3 that I've done in totality are Caleb, Jayden, and Drake Maye. After watching all that, I would take Jayden number 1. I think the 3 things that make it stand out for me are, number 1, I think his ball placement versus man coverage is the best in the draft. We see that in the NFL on a consistent basis. We're starting to see more and more of it. This is why I say, Rich, every quarterback in the NFL is accurate. It's the NFL. There's 60 people on the planet that have those jobs. Everybody's accurate. Accuracy is throwing it to your guy. Ball placement, throwing it away from the defense. He's got the best on tape. Number 2, evaluating this class is the hardest since I've gotten into this job for me, because it's either things are made so difficult by some of these offenses that are, and I know Kurt had mentioned this, it's so difficult to evaluate, like, what is this? Or they make it so easy. So the number 2 thing is, when your offense and you as a pass game generate these explosive plays, what does it actually look like? Are you getting 4 or 5 20-plus yard completions in college football because you threw a bubble out to the right, or you had some trick play, or you ran around for 9 seconds and threw a ball down wide open to a guy in the NFL? We know that's not real life, or downfield, excuse me. So what does it look like? And he's got the most, I see you throw that post-cross concept, or I saw you throw 4 verticals and you rip that seam. Most transferable stuff to the NFL. And then I think the third thing is pocket peace. I think Caleb has tremendous pocket reaction, and his pocket suddenness is really good. Jayden has just this calm, this peace, this subtlety movement-wise that I think is different than the others as well. So I would go Jayden 1. I think that he plays faster both mentally and physically. So often 1, 2, 3, ball comes out of his hands. We know that, and I think one of the things that I've learned, Rich, over the past couple of years of just doing this with the college kids and, watching the NFL guys is, kind of the state of the NFL quarterback wise is you really win making a ton of pars and then occasionally dropping birdies or an eagle. That's what Patrick did this last year. And I think Jayden does that as well. And then I would do Caleb too. Tremendously talented. I see some of the stuff that I talked about with Jayden. The ball placement versus man isn't always perfect. Now, I don't think USC was super talented on the outside. I thought their offensive line was poor. You don't have a lot of examples of like 1, 2, 3 ball out or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ball out and the suddenness and the quick twitch of that and the shortstop play of that. Not a ton of examples this year on tape. Again, I think it's a little bit because of what's around him. Tremendous playmaker. I think, Rich, I'll say this. I think he's a tremendous talent. That Notre Dame game is a tough game to look at. Real NFL defenses. Al Golden dialed it up for Notre Dame, and Notre Dame created some pressure, and I think that's a game where if I was Chicago or Washington or New England, I would want that would be the first game I would watch with him, and I would sit there and just watch that with him, and I would kind of take in everything that he's regurgitating.
Wow. All right, so there's a lot of food for thought right there. Dan Orlovsky here on the Rich Eisen Show. So let's start with Jayden Daniels. Is he good enough to jettison Justin Fields? Because everybody believes that Caleb Williams sure is. So you would then say you would, if you were Ryan Poles, send off Justin Fields and draft Jayden Daniels over Caleb Williams? You would do that?
I would if I was Chicago, yes. And again, I think super highly of Caleb. I would say this. Both Caleb and Jayden are just as dynamic athletically as Justin and are both better throwers of the football. And so because of that, and again, I like Justin. I still think Justin has a really bright future in the NFL. But because of that, I would say Chicago, yes. Take quarterback one. And again, I think I would go with Jayden. I still think Caleb's a tremendous talent. And, the context, I was actually talking with Daniel Jeremiah. Obviously, you guys crushed it this past weekend again. And
Thanks.
He's so good at his job. But I was talking with him about it the other day, and it was a great conversation because all the things I said just now to you about Caleb, he was like, go back and watch last year, meaning 2 seasons ago when they had a little bit more talent around them. And so, for me, Rich, it's not the knock on Caleb. It's more of when I watched Jayden, it just kept elevating and elevating for me what the opinion of what I had of him was.
Well, but then this is the second part of it too, is for Chicago though, and this is the part where Ryan Poles needs to clearly remove this from his thinking, but I'll throw it out there anyway. Is they traded up for Trubisky and left Mahomes on the board, and here's a guy who looks the most like Mahomes that I've seen in quite some time, and you're going to leave him on the board for Jayden Daniels when this is clearly Mahomes' league and everybody's looking for the next Mahomes, and it sure looks like it's Caleb, right?
Yeah. I mean, Caleb definitely has that playmaking ability, that suddenness. It's not like Jayden is Joe Flacco either now. I mean, his no offense to Joe, but like this young man.
I hear you.
That's one of the things, Rich, too, is 5-6 years ago when we were doing, talking about quarterbacks, you would say, man, this guy's a great athlete and playmaker, and it would be this differentiator. It's not anymore. They all are. I honestly think the differentiator now is how much example do you have of that guy consistently playing on time and on rhythm and on balance and seeing it the right way and cutting the ball loose within the construct of a timing concept. Because I've talked about this, Rich, the NFL is cyclical. So it's starting to look a lot like now what it did in the early 2000s quarterback play is you're going to have to be super efficient with your pass game. You're going to have to get the ball out on time. You're going to have to play within structure on a consistent basis. Defenses are far too prepared and athletic and smart now. And so I think it's flipped a little bit. I think the more examples you have of guys, and you just have more, I have seen more examples of this from Jayden that are, I could take that. Yep. It's going to happen on Sundays. Yep. It's going to happen on Sundays. Than I can from Caleb. And I caveat that with, I was surprised with how poor USC was on the outside this year. And so I don't know if he had a ton of examples or opportunities to do that.
Dan Orlovsky here on the Rich Eisen Show. Then what would you counsel New England to do at 3 if Drake Maye's sitting there? And again, I know that there's puzzle pieces that might land in free agency, but yeah. I just don't know if they be the ones to go flip draft capital, which they have no really business doing these days. They got to use it for their own engine for Justin Fields. I'm assuming they're just not going to hit the quarterback in the free agent market and will enter the first Thursday in Detroit, potentially needing to draft one. What would you do?
If New England wants to take Drake Maye at 3, they better have a free agent already signed. Drake Maye has to be on the Jordan Love type of timeline. Drake Maye has to sit, and I'll give you the one reason why, Rich. His feet are too sloppy and too all over the place. And I know this, again, kind of the conversation I just had about cyclical in nature and style of play. And I've learned this. I've adjusted the way I look at it, from Sam Darnold to Mitchell Trubisky. I've watched all these high-end quarterbacks in the NFL refine and work on. If you go into the NFL and mechanically your feet are sloppy and you don't fix it, you're going to struggle. You might get away with it here and there. You're going to struggle. I've watched Josh Allen fixes or refine. I've watched Patrick Mahomes do it. I've watched Lamar Jackson do it. They all have to. And Drake Maye is an amazing talent. I love his Pittsburgh game. He's the difference in the game. He makes some big time plays down the field. He controls the line of scrimmage with protection. Ball comes out on time, drops that back leg and rips it. And then I see some plays like, hey man, you can get away with that against Pitt on that deep crosser and versus man coverage, but that you're not going to survive a long time in the NFL like that. And I just think so often we take these young players, and I say this all the time, Rich, these guys are getting drafted early because they're talented. I don't necessarily have to tell people about the talent. Part of my job is I got to find the flaw, find the weakness, find the bad, what needs to get fixed so the talent constantly is at the top. And, if New England takes him and expects him to play right away, that gives me agita thinking about it, because I want that young man to sit for a year or two, refine that lower half, and then unleash like Green Bay did.
All right. So in the time I have left with you, let me just ask you then, do you put McCarthy or Penix over May in that regard?
No.
Okay.
The one that I would put sniffing Drake would be JJ. I think JJ McCarthy, and this is, I haven't watched every single snap of his so far. I'm about 40-50% done through it. I called his first college game ever, so I'm a massive fan of JJ's.
Well, and you could skip the second half of the Penn State game too, so you could move it along, because he didn't.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah. I didn't think about. Can I touch on that real quick?
Sure.
Can I touch on that real quick?
Sure.
I get frustrated when I hear people say, "Well, if he's that good, why didn't they throw it more?"
Oh, please. Yeah, I know, right?
Guys, they went 15-0.
That's right.
If they needed to throw it more, they would have, and so, and it's just the style of play that Jim, Harbaugh wanted to play. I think two things that I love about JJ that have stood out on tape is I think he makes very difficult things look easy, and that's a trait that is unique in the NFL. And then, I always say, Rich, like, you got to walk the fine line between reckless and aggressive. I don't know if there's a guy in this draft more confident in what his eyes tell him to do with the football than JJ. And again, I love that trait in quarterbacks.
Dan Orlovsky here on the Rich Eisen Show. Okay, before I send you off onto your good day on Monday, two things I want to hit you on. Jason Kelce is retiring as you and I are talking right now. He's announced his retirement. You think of what when you think of Jason Kelce, Dan?
All-time Philadelphia sport athlete, all-timer. My wife called me like 25 minutes ago. She texted me and she said, my wife's from Philadelphia, diehard Eagles fan. She said, hey, I'm calling you. I need to talk to you. Panic sets in. What's up? And she goes, is Kelce retiring? And I'm like, Rich, my wife, you briefly spent time with her. And I'm like, what, babe? I thought something was wrong with you. So all-time Philadelphia sports athlete. I think he's one of the greatest centers of all time. I think the athleticism stood out. Cog for one of the best offensive lines in the NFL over the last, decade or so, that one in Philadelphia. So all-timer. And the great thing for us, the lucky thing for us, is we are not done seeing him. He will be a star in TV if he wants to be.
I agree. No doubt about it. And I mean, honestly, a huge void. I mean, 13 seasons being an all-time first ballot Hall of Famer too, right, Dan? Like, that's not even a question. Right?
Lock. Yep. Lock. Absolutely.
All right. So then before I let you go, what's your favorite Chris Mortensen story, Dan?
Man, Rich, I think my favorite Chris Mortensen story is we both work in a world that is about us, and he never made it about him. And I think that is, the cliche is live a life that impacts people, that makes them want to emulate it. And we throw that around too much. His life is one that I certainly want to try and emulate. And that's a kind of encapsulating, but I will never forget the multiple times that I had gone on when I was early in this career and said something on TV. And that was probably a little loose in regards to some stuff. And he would just go out of his way to give me like the arm grab and pull me to the side and just give me like a, hey, just be smart, be careful, think about it in this way or this regard, and profound impact.
So he what, just to have a filter or think before you, Yeah,
I think it was in totality thing, hey, just so you know, or, I think it's a little bit of filter, a vantage point of how it's going to be received, the lens for everybody. And then also, just trying to give me tidbits of how I could stand out a little bit more, how I could rephrase a little bit differently, and totally unnecessary, but he did it anyway.
He's just one of my favorites. One of my favorites, man. And please send my regards and condolences to everybody in the building. I'm assuming that's where you are right now.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure on NFL Live it'll be quite a moment. So I'll be thinking of you and everybody else there. Pass along all my condolences. Literally, I know half that building, so please do so.
You're a good man, brother.
Right back at you. Thanks for the time, Dan. You're the best. We'll chat soon. You got it. And send my best to the missus. I mean, my goodness. That's so funny.
Tough afternoon.
I know, that's right. Send my best. That's Dan Orlovsky here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.